Hey everyone, I see folks starting to come in here. I'll give it just a couple minutes to give people a chance to join and get connected. Glad to see everyone joining. All right, well, we'll get started here. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Justice. I'm the technology manager at Northhouse, and I'm just going to give you a really quick overview of how Zoom platform works for those of you who have not been in a webinar with us yet. So if you look down at the bottom of your screen, you'll notice a few buttons. There's a chat button. That's the best way to share general comments. If you want to say something to us, if you're having an issue, if you can't see or hear, chat it in there. If you click on that chat button, you can choose whether to chat just to the panelists. So that's me, Rob Torkildson, and Matt, or you can chat with the panelists and attendees, and then everyone else in the webinar will be able to see that message from you and respond to you. There's also a Q&A button. If you have any questions during the presentation, that's the place to put them. If it's a question, please put it into the Q&A, not the chat box. That just allows us to easily keep track of all those questions and mark them off as we answer them. It gets hard to keep track of those questions if they're in the chat box. So remember, chats for general messages and comments, Q&As for questions. And then again, you can type into that Q&A box at any time during the presentation. Once we get to the Q&A section at the end, we'll work our way through those questions and address them as best we can. Sometimes we are not able to get to every question, so we apologize if that's the case, but we'll do our best. And then there's also a polling button down at the bottom of the screen also. I see people are already starting to fill that out, so that's awesome. You can do that at any time as well. There's just some easy questions there about how you heard about the webinar. And then at the very bottom of that, there's also a question about whether or not you would like us to send you a recording of the webinar afterwards. So make sure you click yes there and we'll email that out to you. That can be really handy if you miss anything or if you do have any audio problems during the webinar and you can't hear, you can always watch the recording later. And then we will also put that recording up on YouTube. So I think I've covered everything there in the housekeeping realm. So I will pass this off to Matt Nessheim next, and he will introduce Rob.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Assuming everybody can hear me, my name is Matt Nessheim. I'm the Operations and Facilities Director at Northhouse, and just wanted to say thanks for attending our 2020 online wooden boat show. First time we've done it online, which has actually surprisingly allowed us to get a much wider range of voices at the table. So far this week we've had a sail on Yordis, which lasted 4 out of the 15 hours, and we broadcast that on YouTube. We've had a bunch of boat tours. We're doing demos every day at noon. So there's a lot of content. It doesn't look like the Wooden Boat Show normally does, but yeah, we're happy that folks such as yourself attend. And we hope you feel like you're kind of part of things here. So without further ado, the speaker this evening is, I'll call him a local. He's really a Hovelander. So folks probably know that there's a difference between being from Grand Marais and living up in Hovland, but yeah, so he lives up in Hovland. He's an explorer, you know the type, and yeah, a good friend of the school. And he did a sort of epic journey, which is sort of his modus operandi, and he's here to talk a little bit about that. But as sort of a precursor to it, we're going to show a quick little video. And if you'll excuse me, I'm going to wrestle with the technology gods for just a sec, and enjoy.
In 1947, my grandfather, Thor Heyerdahl, sailed across the Pacific to prove how man advanced. 70 years later, mankind is faced with a crisis. Now, I'm I'm beginning an epic voyage of my own to search for sustainable life on an overloaded post-apocalyptic planet. We're at that point where the Vikings were 1,200 years ago. They were running out of resources and they had climate change. And from a sustainability point of view, right now, humanity's in that space. We're outgrowing our planet's ability to serve us. We're building a vessel, a self-sustaining Viking longboat, the Midgard Heron. In it, we will journey to places and systems that are sustainable and see how we can bring these back home. Our Viking boat is modeled exactly on the archaeological remains of the ancient Viking vessels. So it's a completely wooden boat. We're building it in white oak. Every clinker bolt is going in by hand. We've hand forged the bolts ourselves. We make our own ropes by hand. Every element of this vessel is a demonstration of intelligent, sustainable design. It's not going to be easy. We're sailing around the Cape of Storms, across the North Sea. But if we don't do this, we may never find a way for humanity to survive. The Midgard Heron. Drifting across time to gather examples for our own survival. Some are advanced, some are archaic. We're searching for practical pointers on how to thrive post-plastic, post-pollution, post-pandemic. Single mangrove seed provides a basis for viable life on Earth. Out of this sea pod comes an entire system. This is the most critical element and starting point of many of our regenerative practices at the moment. The goal of this expedition is to engage the global community in a dialogue on what intelligent life on Earth would look like. We want to visit spaces and show how systems can work, where we can have regenerative economy, where we can produce organic, natural food without pesticide, where our systems for cleaning and harvesting water all work how they should work on the planet and how they add and regenerate life. And we're wanting to show the pockets of intelligence globally, the active global citizens who are working on real models of viable sustainability. We have the biggest impact and the biggest opportunity to regenerate systems like the good work that these people are doing here. So it's time for us to realize that the alternative is the extinction of our whole species.
So we've got a pocket of intelligence right here. I'm in one room, and in the other, again, a little intro. Rob Torkildson, he was actually on this expedition that we just watched a little bit of. No, he's not the guy who was talking, but I think he's more enjoyable. So without further ado, Rob Torkildson.
Hello, everybody. Can you see me, I hope? Okay.
Rob, we can see your presentation, but we cannot see your beautiful face.
Oh, darn it. Okay. Is there something I need to do then?
Hang on one second. Let me get you going here again. Rob, down at the bottom of the screen, you should have a start video button.
Yep. Okay.
There you are. Great, thanks.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to the show, the Odyssey. I'm going to do a little slideshow, and I'm going to kind of lead you through this, the Midgard expedition that I was on starting in January into February, led by Bjorn Heyerdahl, who is the grandson of Thor Heyerdahl. And a little background on how I got involved with Bjorn and this expedition. I'm a part of the Explorers Club, and so is Bjorn Heyerdahl and a few others on the team. And Bjorn and I were discussing expeditions. We were thinking about going from the Sahara over the Atlas Mountains to the Atlantic. And all of a sudden, Bjorn mentioned that he always wanted to do a Viking expedition, and that's something I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. And sparks flew, and he told me that he inherited the White Oak to build a Viking vessel from his grandfather and his unpublished journals. And then we just, it was born 2 years ago, the expedition. And so Bjorn asked me to recruit team members, up to 12, while Bjorn would build the boat with his boat builder, Andre van Volt, in South Africa. The reason being South Africa is that Bjorn lives in South Africa. So that's why it was going, okay, a second here. Next, okay. Yeah, I just want to check this out. Okay, here we go. And so I went about recruiting rowers and sailors and explorers while Bjorn and Andre started to build the boat, and that was 2 years ago. So I just want to quickly introduce the team. You'll see a slide here. I'm the one with the big head on the right, and then you've got Andre with the beard. He's the boat builder. Jason McLeod, he's our medic. Bjorn Heyerdahl in the back. Shannon, she's a round-the-world solo racer. Suzanne Williams, she's a Viking historian and all-around explorer. You've got Allie, she's a physical therapist. She's Bjorn's wife. You've got Nico above, and he's rowed solo across the Pacific. Next to him is Kaz Landers. She's done this solo rowing trips all around the world. She's an Olympic athlete from England. Eric Christensen, he's a sailor and a climber. And Nick Highgate, he's an Afrikaner. He's the captain of the boat. The only one missing in the picture who took the picture is Erden Urak, and he's the first person to go solo around the planet under his own power, and he has 14 Guinness World Records. And he was kind of my prize find for the expedition, and he brought a couple of the other of the best rowers in the world. So it was a really formidable group of people, and I often wonder what I was doing there. I mean, I'm just an old fisherman and you know, ship navigator, but it worked out, and we had 2 years of planning. And down here in the far right bottom that's Bjorn Heyerdahl when he was a young boy, and of course his grandfather Thor Heyerdahl is up in the middle there. And he, you know, so he grew up with a real legacy. And one of the great joys of this expedition for me was to just hear stories of Thor Heyerdahl and what it was like to grow up around this amazing man. And Bjorn would tell stories of how Thor he'd write in this tower that he had in Italy, and nobody was allowed in the tower. And one day Bjorn snuck in there, and he was so afraid when he was like 4 years old, and he went up into the tower thinking the whole time he was going to get yelled at. And his grandfather took him, put him in his lap, and told him a story about Easter Island. You know, so I heard a lot of great stories like that from Bjorn. But during this process, every week we were from all over the world: Colombia, England, South Africa, Canada. And we would have these chats, and we all had our sort of positions in the expedition. I was the writer, recruiter, second navigator, and we all did fundraising. So for instance, I went out to Seattle for a big fundraiser at the Yule Fest out there with a couple of the others. And so everybody was putting a huge effort into, raising the funds while the boat was being built little by little. And you can see there, there's Bjorn and Andre in the shop in South Africa, and they've got the white oak. And Andre and Bjorn, they went up to Norway and spent time with the master boat builders up there, and wrote on a couple of the replicas to get a real good idea of what we were up against. And then, Andre's, he's really a kind of a MacGyver type, and he just started tearing into it and building. Now, the expedition was going to be in parts. And so as you can see at the bottom, the ship was built in South Africa. And in January, we were all going to convene there and run trials and go around the Cape of Storms, the southernmost point of Africa. And we're fairly sure that that's never happened before. I don't think anybody's ever taken a wooden Viking boat around the Cape of Storms. So it was a big deal for us. And then our plan originally, before the world changed, was right now, we should have been up in the North Sea, going from Norway up to Scotland and Ireland and working our way down. And you can see we were going to do stages down to Portugal, into the Mediterranean, through the Mediterranean, and up into the Black Sea. So that was our original intent. We're on hold right now. So we'll see how things progress as the world changes. So here we go, and everything was done just like the Vikings did it, as he mentioned in the video. So there's, big chunks of white oak, and we made the mast out of Douglas fir. And it was just a lot of really hard work, especially for Andre. He worked around the clock. And, progress was made little by little. And I have to admit, it seemed really surreal at this stage. Like, it didn't just feel like it was really ever going to happen. Okay, and this is Elton, and Elton turned out to be just this amazing. He was Andre's helper, and he did a lot of the really hard work, the clinkers and all that, and he designed the masthead, original design. It's nothing that's been done before by the Vikings, and took this big slab of wood and just worked it, and also. I don't know if I have any slides, but on the boat itself, he did some really beautiful, intricate carvings. And now we're starting to get the strikes up there. It's starting to really look like a boat. And in the meantime, we're furious. We're all just trying to raise money any way we can. We have to buy sails, and we have to get oars, and to get certified to go to sea. We've got to have all kinds of safety equipment. So, our bills were running up over $100,000, and it's not easy to raise that kind of money. So it was a lot of work, and you can see getting the design. So there it is. And so this was, I was still here in Hovland while this was going on. And, everybody, all except the Afrikaners, they were all over the world. And we were just watching at this point and having these weekly meetings and just watching the progress. And we got some companies like Ullman Sails, Earth Charter, Engel Coolers, Earth Touch started donating money. And we ended up getting a beautiful square hemp sail, really nice sail. And so here they are at the boatyard. They got the sail on, they got the mast up, and that was a really big day, you know, especially for the guys down there on the ground. And so now they're going to do an initial, they're going to put it in the water. So they take it over to a big dam close to where Bjorn's ranch is. They haul it over there and set it in the water for the first time. And it was, you know, all the clinking and everything, it was done with hemp rope, Swedish pine tar, linseed, and she actually floated. So, boy, we saw this, and then it got exciting. And this was in November of last year. So now it seemed, you know, real for us. And there's Bjorn with his family, and it's a wonderful family. I really enjoyed his kids. Up top there is Thor, and the little one down below is Odin, and there's Sven and his wife Ollie, and yeah, just a wonderful family. So now it came time to get inspected by the South African Coast Guard, port directors, and whatnot, to see if they would even let us put it in the Indian Ocean. And we were quite worried about it. Just the standards are really high, and we knew that they'd even be possibly higher in Norway. So, and we wanted to do everything very traditional, but, you know, of course, we had to have all this high-tech safety gear, navigation gear. We had to have a motor, which we fought against, but we ended up having to have an outboard motor just in case. But we got our certificate. So that was the big day. So we actually knew that we're really going to sail. So then we all flew in from all over the world and to Bjorn's place, and which is, his ranch is about 2 hours northwest of Johannesburg. And we all met, and here we are at the first roundtable meeting to start the discussions. And a lot of ceremony was involved in this first week. A lot of Viking type ceremonies that Bjorn had arranged, and Suzanne, who's a Viking historian. So we did a lot of ceremony, a lot of they're doing amazing things, and they were all just, you know, super nice people. We really gelled quick, and that was a pleasure. So here we are, and you know, there's our. To me, it seemed like we had Noah's Ark sitting in the yard. You know, it just seems so strange to see this big wooden boat sitting out there like that. And we'd sit around in fires and discuss and get to know each other. It was, for Bjorn, it was really important that we got to know each other really deeply before we set to sea. So there was a lot of kind of deep discussion and getting, you know, trying to understand each other, our motivations and whatnot. And here we are in one of the nights of ceremony. And we did things like Suzanne had made burned rune stones, and we had to randomly pick rune stones that were sort of symbols of our place on the boat, and it was very interesting. So then it came time to finally let's go to sea, and so we got her up on a trailer. The trailer could only hold 3 tons. We were overweight, so in essence, we were illegal. And so we decided we were going to take back roads and try to travel at night and just hope we didn't get stopped. And on our way to Durban. And the funny thing is, on the way out of this driveway here, the masthead hit the tree, and Andre got knocked off the boat and got stung by like 20 wasps, and almost went into some kind of shock. So our medics got, to work a little bit, and we finally got on the road pretty late, getting dark. And on the way, at one point, we were in like a caravan, and we were finally surrounded by South African police officers. And so that was a 2-hour ordeal. I'm not sure exactly what took place on the sidelines, but we ended up rolling out. And right after sunrise, the axle broke on the trailer. So here we are on the side of the road. We were out there for like 5-6 hours. It was over 100 degrees. And Andre, aka MacGyver, got out his welding kit and re-welded the trailer and got us back on the road again. He was really amazing. He could just do anything. It just mind-boggling. And this is how strange things were. Like this is 2 in the morning, getting gassed up, and wherever we went, the Africans would just look at us. They just stop and stare at us like they were seeing some aliens from outer space or something. It was really, really funny as we rolled on down to Durban with the boat. And the boat's name is Heron, which is goes back to the Heyerdahl family history, which goes back, they've traced it way back into the Viking history. So we got to Durban, and we finally got her in the ocean, in the Indian Ocean. And that was just such a great experience. We've been working for this for 2 years. There was a lot of anxiety, a lot of hard work. For myself, it was kind of an obsessive period. And to be out there finally rowing and sailing, it was just wonderful. And actually, when they had the boat in the trials in the dam, they realized they didn't have enough freeboard on the side, so they added a few strikes. And so that helped, because it was laying pretty low in the water. And the boat is about, I might be a little wrong, but it's about 36 feet by 8 to 10 feet across, and weighs a couple tons. But she sailed really nice. And with the square sail, it's just kind of 2 hands and playing the wind. And it was kind of fun. And we had a big tiller. You can see it there. So we did the first sea trials, and then as you saw in the video, that part of this was about finding sustainable solutions, and which is very important to Bjorn Heyerdahl. He creates what he calls climate parks around the world, and these are sustainable communities, and he's very knowledgeable about all this. So he took us on some educational type tours or getaways, and this was really fun. With 2 armed guards, we walked across, I don't know if I can pronounce it, but it was the Hululuwe Game Park. So we hiked across the whole game park with these 2 guards, and it was a real educational thing. And I might add too that we had Earth Touch film production company with us all the time, which I found to be a real pain in the butt, because when you have a film crew with you, you're always on a timeline, and you get into this time-driven scenario. Add that to weather, and it's really tough, and it does add to a lot of tension. But crossing the park, we saw everything: giraffes and elephants and rhinoceros. It was just amazing. And then we went up to St. Lucia estuary, and we took the boat up the estuary, and we got real intimate with hippos. I took this picture, and that's how close I was. We were really close, and huge alligators. And we visited some really state-of-the-art sustainable gardens. This is Thomas Lander. He's Swiss, and he's created one of the most beautiful farms, organic farms I've ever seen in my life. And he taught us all about different soils and how to make this kind of landscape happen. So then in Durban, we arranged a big media event for a beach cleanup. So we got a lot of people from Durban came out, and we walked their beach, and we cleaned up all the plastic. And that was a really fun day. And then we had a competition for sand art or carving, whatever you want to call it. And so this was the winner. And then Bjorn grew up in kind of a Zulu area. So we went to his kind of the village where he kind of grew up next to, and he had a lot of friends there, and he helps them out quite a bit. And we spent a night drumming and doing all this and that, and all of a sudden, much to my dismay, the Zulu chief decided that I needed to be the Viking chief, and so I had to strip down, which is not fun when you're my age, and get all dressed up in Zulu outfits. So, and then we did all kinds of mock battling with shields and swords and all kinds of stuff. But it was a fun night, and it wasn't like a cheesy cultural night. It was actually, it felt very authentic, and it was nice. So here we are, and when we were in Durban, the Durban Yacht Club let us stay in the yacht club, and Durban's, you know, it's a little bit dangerous, so it was nice to be in this gated yacht club, and we camped there and kept the boat there. And here we are packing up to get ready to head down on another long road trip down to La Agulhas, which is where we would launch to go around the southernmost point of Africa. And so it was, you know, logistics were crazy. We had like 15 people. We had a film crew. And what we did is we kind of worked in shifts, and we had like duty rosters. And so like, it seemed like every fourth day, I would be in charge of cooking all 3 meals. And then the next day I would be in charge of gear. And then next day, ballast or you know, putting pine tar on the ship or something, you know. So we had this schedule. We worked really hard, and it was really hot. I left Hovland in a blizzard, and I got out there, and it was 100 degrees difference, and it was painful. So the press was following us around all over the place. So we were in all the newspapers, and this was kind of fun. We got involved in, we were invited to be in a dragon boat race. So we did that, and it was a lot of fun. You know, we kind of pretended like we were Vikings and raiding these Chinese ships or whatever, and just met a lot of good people and had a lot of fun. So then we get down to the point where we're going to launch to go around the Cape, and here's Bjorn just kind of contemplating. A lot of pressure, weather. I mean, you had to get the perfect weather window, and we weren't getting it. We had a film crew that was pushing us, and we had local support that wouldn't go out with us. They said it was too dangerous. Even the local fishermen wouldn't go out with us. So, and Bjorn, you know, he wanted to go. This is his lifelong dream, and so, you know, we got in this like waiting game for this little window when we could head out, because you know, imagine you got the Indian Ocean, the Atlantic, and then you've got another system coming up from the Antarctic. And so I'm an old navigator, and I found it one of the most confusing seas I've ever been in. And ballast. We struggled with ballast. So we started with water. All these bottles, these plastic liter bottles that we cleaned up, and we filled them up with water, and then we, you know, put them in. And it was just so time consuming, and the bottles would leak and everything else. And eventually we moved on to stones from the beach. Well, that had its own problems. And in the end, we ended up buying these cement kind of like curbs, 2,500 pounds worth, and we put them in the hold. And that worked pretty good. We got fairly good stability then. So this is Erd Nurek, 14 Guinness World Records, the first person to go around the world under his own power, amazing athlete. I mean, he skied, bicycled, rode across 3 oceans, just a very driven person and very serious. And I was thankful to have him on board because he is extremely safety conscious. And I did find the Afrikaners weren't. They could care less if you had a life preserver on or whatever, you know. So it was good to have Erden there to kind of keep the balance. And here he is plotting our route around the Cape. And here we go. We're setting in, getting her in the water, which, you know, when you take a wind boat like this in and out of the water, that causes all kinds of other issues. So we were constantly leaks and cracking boards and constantly have to repair on the go. So that I learned a lot about boats, wooden boats on this journey. So there it is. It's 6 in the morning, and I'm heading out to go out to round the Cape. And we had 2 rescue teams that were going to take us out of port, follow us a certain way until we just got the sail up and headed out. So we launched at the end of a big storm system. It was big rollers when we set out. So that's big rolling motions, you know, and if you've been at sea, you know what that does. And so our crew, all but 3 of us, got very sick. So myself, Nick Highgate, and Erden, we pretty much had to run the boat at that point for a while because everybody got really sick. And we got out to sea. We were doing 3 to 4 knots, not great. I mean, it was kind of bad actually. And then all of a sudden we just hit the doldrum, just nothing, no winds. And we weren't around the Horn yet. And so we were kind of stuck there in the water and waiting. And finally a little breeze came up and we managed to get the sail, you know, some wind in the sail again. And we were carrying numerous flags on the expedition. We had the Earth Charter flag, we had the Explorers Museum flag. And so here we are, we're just kind of waiting to get some more wind so we can get around. And you can see here, everybody, a lot of people are pretty sick and surprisingly really sick. I was kind of surprised, but eventually we picked up some wind and we got going 6 to 7 knots. And here we are rounding. We had a drone operator manage to catch this, but this is actually when we're rounding the Horn, southernmost part of Africa. And so, you know, this was a big historical event down there in South Africa, and so big media events and everything. We made it, and we were at sea for 21 hours rounding the Cape, and we pulled into this little town, Hermanus, at like 3 in the morning. No, you know, by this time nobody thought we were coming in, but we snuck in at like 3 in the morning in the dark, and it was a big relief. So we were pretty happy. That's myself and Nick Highgate, the captain. And I just something really interesting. So we rounded the Cape. We eventually went onward over to Cape Town and all that. But after we rounded the Cape, the crew was pretty strained. You know, we'd been together 24/7. We were stressed out and been a long time. And so we just all decided to go our own way for a couple of days and just get away from each other. So I went into this town and I had a nice lunch and I was wandering around and I saw this Hemingway bookstore. And I thought, oh, yeah, I'm a big Hemingway fan. So I went in there and since I was writing the story of the expedition, I asked if they had some local literature, some history of rounding the Cape and whatnot that would help with my research. And I ended up spending like 3 hours in the bookstore. And when I left, they gave me this. And this is the first edition of Aku Aku by Thor Heyerdahl. And they did a nice note for the expedition and everything. And that was really nice. So, I'll always have this to remind me of that epic journey around the Cape. And I'm open for any questions now or later. Where we're going, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for the expedition, but I know I've got a lot of ideas, and we'll see what happens.
Rob, give us just a second here. We'll get Matt back on and he can relay some of the questions from the participants to you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Rob. That was awesome. Great job.
Thanks, man.
We got a couple of questions from folks who've been watching. A couple questions that I'm going to try to group together based on. There's some questions about boats. So a question from John Robinson: what are you using to seal between the boards, and what's the finish on the wood?
Well, we had hemp rope, and we used Swedish pine tar. We shoved it up in there, and then we had linseed oil.
Sounds pretty classic. How about also from John, were the Viking bolts made of iron or bronze?
Iron. These on our boat. Yeah.
And a final one from John. How did they navigate, and did you use the same methods as would have been traditional?
No, in the future, well, we used a compass, but while we were in Seattle at the Yule Fest, I met a man that knows how to navigate like the Vikings with soapstone in a dish of water. And so the plan was that I was, before going to Norway, going to go study under him in Seattle. But we just used a compass and charts.
All right, let's see here. What else do we got? Karen says, I'd like to hear more about the Viking ceremonies.
Well, so it took place, the big one was all night long, and big fires, and Susan Williams she'd studied under like Sami shaman, and she knew Viking history. So there was like big bonfires, going through the fires. There was, what do you call it? When you burn a symbol into the skin. Branding. There's some branding going on. Picking of rune stones. And there was a lot of self-confession. Like you had to go in the middle of the group and state your fears and things like that. And it was all, what it really came down to was getting to know each other on a deeper level.
Right. Stating your fears in front of others doesn't sound very Scandinavian, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. Yeah, it was not easy.
Joan asks, where do people sleep on the boat?
Right on the deck. Not comfortable. In fact, I never slept. I chose to stay awake.
David Siebart asks, what are your plans for provisions, and how would your storage capacity affect a long journey?
Well, of course, we learned a lot of lessons, and Andre, made plans to make things, like our rowing situation was not good. It was horrible. So like the traditional Viking boats, you'd have a bench with a storage in it, and then you'd have a covered area, and you would go in shifts of sleeping, staying out of the elements. The crew was too large for this vessel. There's 12. It could easily be done with 6, and it should be. So, you know, that, yeah, we had too many people, and it was crowded. And especially when people got sick because they're laying all over the deck, it was hard to maneuver, like when you had to do something.
Sounds lovely.
Yeah.
How much bailing did you have to do? Asks Edward.
All the time. Nonstop. So, 2 people, I mean, we had, you know, hand bailers, pumps. And then, yeah, and it was leaking all the time.
Lewis asks, how long were the oars and how heavy were they?
I'm going to say about 8 feet. And they weren't that heavy. I mean, you know, I could move around fairly good. But the problem with the rowing was the seating wasn't good. We didn't have stable seating. We each had these like survival plastic dealies where we put our stuff into, and we sat on those. It was horrible because you know, you're tipping all over. So Andre, you know, we realized that's just a nightmare. So the plan was to build stable seating where we could store our gear but have a stable seat. But there was 8 rowing stations.
And were you ever required to use pilots in any harbors?
Yes, when we were, and when we pulled in at 3 in the morning, there was no pilot. So, but normally we had to, and we had rescue groups going out, you know, just to get us out of the harbor and make sure everything's all right. And but once we were out of the harbor, we were on our own, and we had no communication with anyone.
How many of the crew will likely assemble for the next voyage? Asks Edward Meyer.
Very good question, Edward. I don't know. It's to be honest, it's not in a good situation right now because you know, financial strains. Several crew members gave up their career, their jobs, and now, you know, we should be in Norway now. You know, live in the glory. You know, the Kon-Tiki Museum, all this stuff was all arranged in Norway, and now it's not happening. And everybody honestly needed a long break from each other, and you know, it got really intense. So, but majority of us are really, really good friends. So I'll leave it at that.
Sounds good. And where was the final destination? Did you end up in Cape Town or Simonstown?
Yeah, Cape Town. And in the boat right now, let's see, we've got it in Gordons Bay right now.
Lewis also asks, where was the head located? Meaning the bathroom on the boat.
Over the side.
Was that
or a bottle, you know, your choice.
Deb Torkildson asks, what did you eat while sailing?
Most people were so sick they didn't eat anything. I ate maybe 1 apple. I mean, we really didn't eat much. But when we were on shore, we ate a lot. We had what the South Afrikaners call braised every day, big barbecues. So, but at sea, we really did not eat much at all.
Yeah. And this is one I'm particularly interested in from Dick Enstead. What was the source of the sails and rigging? Where did you guys source that stuff from?
Ullman sails.
And so they made those for you, or how were those? Okay.
Yeah, they made that especially for us because we wanted everything to be kind of organic, natural. So it's a hemp sail, beautiful sail.
Wow. And the rigging, all the ropes, those were all hemp as well?
Yep.
Okay. Got a few more here. Melissa asks, in ideal conditions, how fast do you believe your ship could have gone?
8 knots.
Wow. Fast.
Ideal conditions.
Ideal, yeah.
But I'd like to note, I've been on a lot of boats, all different types. But the interesting thing about this vessel was it seemed alive. It flexed and it just moved, and you felt, you felt that movement. It bended and it stretched and it oozed, and that was really what I found so fascinating.
Well, I have a question of my own. Where's the boat right now, and what's the future, you think?
Well, it's in Gordon's Bay, which is Cape Town, basically, and we have a collective decision that we will not proceed until we are fully funded out until the next leg.
Yeah.
So because we did this underfunded, and that caused a lot of the tensions.
But you think it has the next round is sometime in the future?
50-50.
50-50.
Yeah.
It's about as good as anything.
Yeah. Well, I'd personally like to build one here in North House, but we'll see if we can get any leverage on that.
I know some boat builders around.
Yeah.
One of them's attending right now, right, John? So I think this would be a good way to wrap up the evening, since we're just about at 8 o'clock. A message from Karin Bodnoy. Someone asked this great question yesterday: what was your greatest challenge and what was your greatest joy of this trip?
Greatest challenge was being with so many people for so long in such a dynamic environment, and also these weren't just, these were like all exceptional people, explorers that are used to doing things solo. So really strong personalities, really talented, capable people. And so I felt a little, at first intimidated, by that, but then not so much later on, after everybody got seasick.
Right. Showed their true colors.
Yeah, and the joy was, this was a childhood dream to go on a Viking ship. So it's a dream fulfilled, and I made some lifelong friends out of the voyage. And I think I have some decent writing coming along. So.
Well, it makes living conditions in Hovland seem pretty nice.
Very nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's about it. And thanks everyone for their questions. Sorry we didn't get to everyone. And again, thanks for attending. There's a lot more content this week. And so check it out. Everything is archived on YouTube and Facebook. So if you miss anything, feel free to go back and check it out, especially on a rainy day. So thanks again to Rob.
Thanks everyone. Appreciate you coming.
And really quickly before we sign off, Rob, is there somewhere online that folks can find you or can find information about the project if it does continue in the future?
Yeah, it's Midgard, Midgard expedition. So there's all kinds of social media wrapped around it. It's a little bit at standstill right now. Just, not a lot of content is going in at the moment, but we just have to see how this summer goes and how funding goes, and yeah.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Rob.
A lot of fun. And thanks everyone for joining us.